Good morning, Year 4s, and welcome to our maths lesson today. So we're going to be carry on looking at the area of a shape. So the learning objective is to find the area of a 2D shape. And then your success criteria are to recall what we measure area in. You can count the squares in a shape. I can link area to multiplication, and I can reason and problem solve. So I just want you to take a moment to think about what area is, because we learned about this yesterday. So just have a think of the definition of area, and then we will come back to that after completing our starter. So I'm going to put the starter up now, so you can pause the video. Please do your fast 5, try and do it within 5 minutes, and then unpause the video and look at the answers. Okay, well done. So these are your answers. So have a go, mark your work. If there's something that you got wrong, try and do the sum again, like we would in class with our purple pen, to see if you can correct where you went wrong. Okay, perfect. So we're going to come back to area now. So Oliver, which is the owl's name, has made a quilt for his bed. So I want you to think of 2 questions. What color covers the biggest area, and what color covers the smallest area? So think about what area means and then answer those 2 questions. Okay, so let's go through this one together. So yesterday we spoke about area covering the inside of the shape. So if we had a shape, the area would be looking at measuring the inside of the shape, okay? And then we compared that yesterday with perimeter, and we said that the perimeter was measuring the outside of the shape, okay? So the blue would be the perimeter, and then the yellow would be the area, measuring the inside. So the inside of this quilt is all of these squares. Okay, we're not worried about the perimeter at all. We are just going to focus on the area. So we're looking at the inside. And the inside of his quilt is made up of lots of different colors. So which color covers the biggest area? So which color's got the most squares? And if we count those, we can see that blue, just by looking at it, blue has got quite a lot. So we'll count those first. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So blue has got 10 squares. We'll just write that down. Okay, and then we just want to double check the other ones. So let's count the greens. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So green has got 6 squares. And then if we count the orange, we can see that orange has got 1, 2, 3, 4 squares. So now that makes it easier to answer the question. So blue covers the biggest area of this quilt, and orange covers the smallest area of this quilt. Okay, so what I've done here is I've just rearranged the colors of his quilt and put them in groups. So you can actually see now that once I've rearranged the colors on his quilt, you can definitely see that blue is covering the biggest area, and green is covering a little bit of it, and then orange is definitely covering the least of the area. So the next question we're going to look at is, what is the total area of Oliver's quilt? So if I had to find out the entire area of this quilt, how would I do that? Okay, I would count all the squares. So it says, make sure you don't count the same squares twice. So when you are counting the squares, if you have paper in front of you, it is a lot easier to just tick the squares off with a pencil. But obviously we can't do that if we don't have the paper. But sometimes it's just good to make a little mark on each square to know that you haven't counted the same square twice. So we're going to count Oliver's quilt now. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Sorry, guys. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Okay, so his quilt has got 20 squares. So therefore, we can say that the area equals 20 squares. Okay, so that is the total area of his quilt. So just remember, we measure area in squares, which we looked at yesterday. Okay, so if we look at the next example, I want you to have a look at this shape. They've already put the squares in for you. So we will come later on in the week to looking at shapes that don't have squares. But for today, we're just going to be measuring the squares inside the shape. So I would like you to tell me what the area is of this shape. So pause the video and tell me what the area is of this shape. Okay, so hopefully when you looked at the area, you counted all the shapes, all the squares inside the shape, not on the outside or perimeter, all of them inside. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Okay, so this area has an area, this shape has got an area of 20 squares. So again, we can say area equals 20 squares. Okay, now lots of the time, these squares are going to either be in centimeters or in meters, depending on what you are measuring. So if you are going to measure the size of a small book, you'd probably use centimeters. If you are going to measure a big football pitch, you would probably use meters. So these squares are centimeter squares. So we can actually add in the units. So area equals 20 centimeter squares. Another way of writing this is area equals 20 centimeters, okay? But we've got to say that they're squares. So you can make a little number 2 and put it at the top of centimeters like that, not next to it, at the top. And that stands for, in maths, that stands for centimeter squared. So if somebody had to look at that, they would know that the area was measured in squares. So you could write that either way. Okay, let's look at the next shape. So measure the area of this shape. It's also in centimeters, so it's given us the unit already. All you need to do is measure the area. So just pause the video and tell me what the measurement of that area is. Okay, so all you needed to do was count the squares. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 squares. So the area of this shape is 6 centimeter squares. The area is 6 centimeter squared. And then we've got the 2 over there. It's really important that we have the word squares or the symbol for squared in our answer. Because if you just write 6 centimeters, somebody might think that you're talking about the perimeter and not the area. So it has to have the squares. That's really important. Okay, so what is the area of this shape? Is counting all of the squares the only way to measure the area of a shape? So what we've been doing is we've been counting all of the squares and all of the squares. Do you think that is the only way? Okay, so Jack uses his times tables to count the squares more efficiently. So he says there are 4 squares in one row. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. And then he says there are 3 rows. Okay, so we've got 1 row, 2 rows, and 3 rows. And then he says 3 rows of 4 squares equals 12 squares. So what Jack has done, he's just used multiplication instead of counting all of them. So he's gone 4, because there's 1, 2, 3, 4 squares. And those 4 squares are repeated 3 times. So repeated once, twice, 3 times. So he's done multiplication where he's gone 4 times 3 equals 12, and then he's written the word squares, which is really important. So you can use multiplication to make it quicker and more efficient to find the area. Because when we did this one, it took us quite a long time to measure and count all the squares, where we could have just gone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we've got 5 times 1, 2, 3, 4 rows, which equals 20. And we would have got the same answer. If we have a look at this one, we counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, where we could have just gone 1, 2, 3 times, there's 2 rows, 1, 2 equals 6. Okay, so using multiplication is a much quicker way to find the area. Okay, so I'd like you to pause the video and use Jack's method of multiplying to find the answer to this shape. So find the area of this shape using multiplication instead of counting all the squares. So just pause the video and have a go. Okay, well done. So the first thing you would have done is count how many squares there are in one row. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you write down 8. We're going to multiply it twice because there's 2 rows of 8. That equals 16. It's much quicker than counting all of the squares. Obviously, we need to remember to put centimeter squares. Or you could have 16 centimeter and then the squared symbol. Okay. All right, so let's look at the next problem. So which shape has been measured accurately? So which is the correct way of measuring area? So just pause the video, write down your answer or just talk about it. Which one do you think is more accurate for measuring area? Okay. So we can see that the squares are much more accurate for measuring area than having the shape, okay, a hexagon, because this shape leaves blue spaces. So you're not actually covering the entire surface of the shape. Okay, that's why we use squares, because squares have got equal sides. They're all going to be the same, and they cover every single part of the shape. Whereas if you're going to put another shape in there, it's not going to do that. If you put in a rectangle, which will cover the whole area, you won't have equal sides, so it's going to be more tricky to measure. So that's why we use squares. It's just really important to remember that. Okay, so your activity for today is to measure the area of 2D shapes by counting the squares. That's the learning objective. So it's up to you whether you're going to count all the squares or if you're going to write the multiplication sum to work out the area. You need to do what is easier for you at this stage. Eventually, I would like everybody to be doing multiplication. But for now, we're just going to choose the method that works best for you. So if you have got teams, these questions will be in teams, and you will need to find the area by counting the squares and writing in the answer. If you do not have teams, then you need to look at the questions on here and write it down on a piece of paper and send it to the Year 4 email address. Okay, you will then have 3 reasoning questions as well after your 5 measuring of the area. So your 3 reasoning questions are, this rectangle has been ripped. What is the smallest possible area of the original rectangle? So you've got to think about, if you had to draw the rectangle back in with all of its sides, what would the area have been? And then what is the largest possible area if the length of the rectangle is less than 10 squares? Okay, so you're gonna have to think about this. You're not just gonna know this, you actually need to get a piece of paper and a pen or pencil and work out different options that it could be. The number 7, Dexter has taken a bite of the chocolate bar. The chocolate bar was a rectangle. Can you work out how many squares of chocolate there were to start with? And the number 8 is very similar to the question we did earlier. Teddy and Eva are measuring the area of the same rectangle. Teddy uses circles to find the area. Eva uses squares to find the area. Whose method do you think is more reliable? Explain why. But don't just write Teddy or Eva in your answer. You need to say Teddy's method is reliable because, or Eva's method is reliable because. So you need to give me a reason. And these questions are also on Teams on your same quiz. Okay, so that is your activity for today. I'm looking forward to marking your work. I really am enjoying all the work that I am seeing for maths on Teams. So keep going. It's always important to watch the video first, and you can watch it as many times as you want until you understand what you need to do. Okay, so have fun, and I'm looking forward to marking your work.